I know we've talked a lot about Jordan Peterson in part because he represents this new generation of
Yeah.
thinkers who are approaching the Bible with fresh eyes, with astonishment. Brierly includes a section of an interview that Peterson did on a podcast where he covered Christ's passion in the Gospels. I think
Yeah.
this illustrates his approach to the Bible. Here's what Peterson says: "You cannot write a more tragic story. It's impossible. The injustices that Christ experienced were the aggregation of everything that people are afraid of, and that each character in this story, Mary, Pilate, Judas, Barabbas, the mob, they all speak to an aspect of our own human condition as we face death, destruction, and despair. And yet," Peterson says, "when we look harder, we see death and resurrection." How would you, again, describe this reading of the Gospels, Jordan Peterson's reading of the Gospels, and why do you think so many people find it attractive?
I would say he's not far from the kingdom of heaven. I mean, I think he's seen something very profound. And he's done, I know this, and it's from a psychological perspective, as the Son of Man is lifted up the way the bronze serpent in the desert was lifted up. Same idea. In the Old Testament, take that which has bitten you and threatens you and look at it. And when you do that, you disempower it. And that's a psychological strategy often, isn't it? Is it, okay, what's frightening you? We got to find a way for you to look at that, is to move into that space. You're afraid of heights? Okay, we got to get you up to heights gradually. It'll take some time, but you got to face that fear and you disempower it. It's the old Buddhist trope about invite your fears in for tea. And the idea there is you've now distanced yourself from your fears. Because when you're caught in anxiety, you become your fear. You know what I'm saying? You are your fear. Well, invite them in for tea means, okay, yes, there's my fear of death. Yes, there's my fear of failure. There's my fear of sickness. And I'm going to serve tea to them. You know, I've now distanced myself from that. He's seeing that now in the passion narratives, is that we are compelled to look at what frightens us. And I think he's dead right about that. You look at Jesus crucified, failure, physical suffering, psychological suffering, abandonment by your friends, institutional injustice. I've often spoken about that. Is all the forms of dysfunction are kind of on display. But then what happens when you look at those? Now, here's what I would do. I'd say yes to all of that. Now, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Because Jesus is not just a literary trope, not just an archetype of the collective unconscious. He lived. You know, he was crucified indeed under Pontius Pilate, whom we can identify historically. And he rose from the dead. In other words, there's a very powerful, divinely sanctioned warrant for our freedom from fear. So as we look at the suffering of Jesus, yes, indeed, there's a kind of psychological liberation, you might say, that comes from that. But keep going. Is God, through his graceful intervention, through raising Jesus from the dead, has definitively liberated us from all those fears. So that now I can wear this cross, this awful sign, this awful instrument of torture, but I can wear it as this beautiful religious symbol. But it happened because of the grace of God. So again, I would say to Jordan, terrific. Now let's keep going.